Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Film Valor. I'm here with Adam today.
Hey guys.
And yeah, I mean, why don't you just sort of start us in, Adam, on what you were thinking about talking about today?
Well, thinking of talking about what it's called typecasting or type actors. You know, it's pretty much what that means is it's a certain type of look or presentation that you want the actor to have in order to fit that character spot on. So, for example, like, I need an actor who's like 6'2", brown eyes, and knows how to do karate or whatever. You know?
Yeah,
it's a certain type. It pretty much look at it as a metaphor. They have to be like this.
Yeah,
like
they have to be that.
It's the like act.
The attractive leading male type who's perfectly good looking, but also tough enough to kill a bunch of bad guys. You know, that type of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So and it's also, it's not just even the type of what they're looking for, but it's also that the actor themselves becomes typed as well. That is a role that they tend to play. Yeah. And I think that's something that we want to talk about today, sort of a more fun, casual conversation about our thoughts on, you know, typecasting and some actors that have broken out of type and casted against type that actually have given the best performances of their career, and how interesting that concept is. And I think sort of just us saying that I think it should be looked at that actors should be casted more so against type, and that people shouldn't be put so firmly in a box of saying this is who this person is.
Right.
And you could see more modern examples of that. Oh, you know who's another great one that I just thought of too when we were making our beyond making our list now, was Steve Carell. And I think that's a great place to start, actually.
Yeah.
Because that's a modern example that everybody knows, right? Steve Carell, everybody knew from The Office, right, as being, you know, the bumbling Michael Scott. And it seemed pretty much, especially with comedy actors too, that he was never going to break out of that mold. That he was always going to be this sort of silly, you know, guy who was not just very surface level.
Yeah, he was good at what he does, and makes people laugh. And
that's right.
And you could definitely see that, you know, for a while that there was a tunnel of him just being the type.
Right,
you know?
and that was it. That there was no progression for him. But then he came out with he did Foxcatcher, right? And then he also did The Big Short, which sort of solidified his being able to really act. You know, as everybody's saying, oh wow, like, are we really not only do we take Steve Carell seriously, but he's really phenomenal in these roles, to the point that somebody else who was casted for this type wouldn't have been as profound. It was that he was working against his type, which had a greater effect.
Which I always believed in. Since, you know, if you're going to go with the flow, you're going to be, you know, blending in.
Exactly, yeah.
But if you go against the grain, you know, you're more likely to be seen.
Exactly, yeah. So for those movies, I mean, it was sort of a risk for those directors, but they should be commended that they worked, that they casted against type, and that they had faith in Carell and then actors like that. But yeah, we have a million other examples here too of people that worked really well against type. Let's see, which one should we start with here? I think also a really modern example as well is Jonah Hill. He was in True Story, and you can see that he's trying to take his career almost the same way as Carell, that he can do a role that's more serious. You know, like he was teetering on that in Wolf of Wall Street, but he was still very funny. But you can see that transition.
And then
being
also,
made,
what was
right?
that one where he's a sports analyst or whatever for the baseball?
Oh, right.
Not hardball.
Moneyball. Moneyball.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, and especially when you see them do interviews in their real person, you could kind of see that they're trying to be like, even Jonah Hill would, like, in an interview about like Superbad or whatever, he would try to make it like a serious, to get the more serious things up front, just so people don't think he's just this goofy guy who could do it all the time.
No, exactly.
You know, even back then, if you really pay attention, for me, it looked like, you know, they kind of want to introduce themselves as not just the funny guys,
being something else too. Yeah. And no, I mean, and that's a good point too. Like, even if you see in Superbad, there's some really great moments of really serious performance there that sort of solidify the comedy, you know, into something that's much greater, which I think is why that movie's had such a lasting effect on people, because of the fact that it was sort of taken seriously, as stupid as those things, you know, those situations were. They were set up to be that way, but also they were sort of grounded in a really realistic relationship between those two guys, and they were so wonderfully performed by Michael Cera.
Yeah, Michael Cera.
Who I think is another person to bring up here too, as well as Jonah Hill, who's now broken through that barrier. And true story, I think he produced as well with Franco. But yeah, I mean, there's another example too of Michael Cera, I think, who was typecasted to be the same thing. Nobody ever gave him really a shot at being out of that realm, you know? At least that I've seen.
Michael Cera is tough because I haven't seen anything where he's any different than what he plays in like Superbad or whatever.
Yeah.
He plays pretty much just kind of the shy guy who is a little goofy or whatever, not really, you know, forceful with anything he does.
And you got to ask though, in that scenario, is it that he was never given the opportunity to be real and to have a more grounded role, or does he not want to do that?
I don't think he wants to. I think he tries to bring it into comedy because I think that there's a lot of people who want to do comedy out there, and you know, and they have that one trait that, you know, that they feel that they could bring to everyone to laugh.
Yeah, it's true.
And sometimes they're very persistent with it, and they sometimes don't get it that it's, you know, it's just a trait that you have.
Right.
It doesn't make you funny. It just makes you awkward to the point that you're funny.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And then also there's that discussion of, like, people always say that it was Jesse Eisenberg versus Michael Cera.
Okay.
And
they're
that,
very, very much the same.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and that they're similar type, you know, that they would keep getting the same type parts. But the reason why they say that Jesse Eisenberg sort of beat Michael Cera to the punch there is because he had more range, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's true.
I hope not.
I think Michael Cera
I'd like
is
to be blown away, you know, by his performance.
Yeah,
you know,
even though, you know, I like Jesse Eisenberg. You know, I think he was really good in The Social Network. I think that was probably his best that I've seen, at least I should say. So, but yeah, like some, you know, Michael Cera, you kind of hope that he he gets to another level where he's shown as being, you know, more rounded, I think.
Yeah.
Either that or, you know, that's who he is. He's always that kid from Arrested Development.
And you don't have to necessarily act. You could write something, you know.
It's true. You know, that's what Jonah Hill did. I think is that he was saying to himself. I mean, I don't know how Wolf of Wall Street worked into the timing of this, but I think when he was trying to make that decision, it seems like it was very conscious that he wanted to do Moneyball, Wolf of Wall Street, and then also True Story. And it seemed like True Story was his own project, or that he was very much on the insides of that, trying to get that pushed forward. I could be mistaken about that. It could be a little different, but I think I remember seeing his name on the other side of those credits too. But I think that's what we were seeing there, was that he was sort of trying to continue to solidify that role for himself, that he can be a different type, you know, and make that transition. And there's a couple other people here too. I think there's an older example here of Jimmy Stewart from Rear Window. That's an interesting example that I actually just read somewhere when we were doing some research on this, that he was casted, you know, that he was sort of against type because of the fact that he's, in that window, he's sort of a peeping Tom, and he gets more excited by, like, staring out the window at women changing than even dealing with his girlfriend, who he sort of ignores, who's, you know, Grace Kelly and everything else, this wonderful... and he usually would play this sort of wonderful, you know, down-to-earth American gentleman, you know, working man, and he's sort of the opposite of all that. But that's a great role for him, and that's probably the one that people remember the most. And it's almost the same thing in Vertigo. He's an obsessive, crazy guy, essentially, that's trying to make the image of a woman in his mind. So you could see that trend with directors all the way going back to Hitchcock and beyond, you know. But that's an interesting concept too, if you're bringing this back in time as well. And I think one of the other interesting examples that we should definitely talk about here is somebody who has now gotten the attention that he deserves, and it's an amazing way that happened. But Bryan Cranston, who was on Malcolm in the Middle, and everybody knew him from Malcolm in the Middle, and then suddenly he comes out with Breaking Bad, right, which was an incredible role as Walter White. That was dynamic. And however that happened, is Vince Gilligan, the guys that made Breaking Bad. Whatever that decision was just near brilliant actually brilliant, I should say, of taking Bryan Cranston, who's this down-to-earth dad, and saying, I think that he has a darker side to him, and having the vision to see that was great, because Bryan Cranston's such a great actor.
He is.
And people would never not acknowledge that if he only had a shot on Malcolm in the Middle,
No, but I think but also because of that, by breaking the mold, you just really introduce a lot of people to something cool and to something more open than it could ever be before.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you something. Watching Malcolm in the Middle, you would never guess.
No, you wouldn't.
You would never. I mean, even if you shaved his head bald at that time, you still wouldn't see it until it actually happened.
You wouldn't. Yeah, it's true, and it's so when I guess the sort of the thesis of this conversation, or the statement, is that in this business where people are so they're trying to and they're trying to avoid risk, that sometimes with enough vision or understanding, or maybe it was just conversations, or the actor having faith to some degree in the performer, and that whatever they felt they had going on that they can bring to it, having that faith that process could work would give us a lot of other great performances. Having people take more of those chances than continuously getting the Hollywood good-looking type and everything else. And I think if you look back also at people like Dustin Hoffman and stuff like that, especially coming up, or I mean, you could see that in The Graduate and stuff like that. He's not a particularly, I wouldn't say from my perspective, a really strong leading man, but that's what makes him so great in those roles, in Marathon Man and in The Graduate and all those other ones, that he was sort of awkward, and Midnight Cowboy, that he's so awkwardly interesting, casted against some of those types, which is great. I mean, I think that's the kind of actors that we, as an industry, should try to embrace, is looking at who they are specifically and how much more dynamic that could make a role.
Because you really, you really grow up with these actors, from when you're like you're a child, and then whatever you watch their movies or whatever, and you always get the same thing. You'll know from like the core that, oh, I know they're gonna do comedy or they're gonna do horror or whatever. Yeah. But when they really get you with one movie where it's it's totally not their character. Yeah. And it's thrown you off guard. Yeah. That brings in more sense of realism to that movie.
That's right.
Because it's not like, oh, I'm watching Dustin Hoffman movie. It's like, they'll be like, whoa, what did he just do? Like,
exactly.
And it gives you that much more reality.
Yeah, and who's another good example too that a lot of people would know in a modern context would know, and everything else, is Steve Buscemi too. If you think about who he was always playing, right, is sort of that not necessarily bumbling, but that nervous, fast talking, we got to do this, we got to do that. Yeah. That was sort of, I think, solidified by his early work, then was broken through by a lot of great roles, but by Boardwalk Empire, I think, was the big one, where he was totally the opposite of that. He was very cool, he was very calm, he always seemed to know what was going on.
Well, this is what I like about it, is like, I remember one of the first movies I ever saw him in was Airheads.
Okay, yeah.
Which was so funny, and, he still has that, quick, Italian kind of mouth to him.
Yeah, he does.
I like.
Which is
funny.
But
then when he does Boardwalk, you just see him sitting at his desk and, with a nice suit on.
And he's scary.
And he's scary because usually he's filled with more emotion, but when you see him without it, it's like, damn.
Yeah, I mean, and it would have been so easy to cast a sort of, a bigger guy who had more, who had more weight to him, so to speak, with, physically.
Well, that's more of the type.
Like right, exactly.
The big guy, like a
really
Kingpin
easy,
type of
right?
thing,
But to say Buscemi can be scary, and he can find that in himself, is having a lot of faith in the actor, which is the right way to go. and it made a much more interesting series.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it that Buscemi was that.
By far, because
that driving
if they
force.
chose someone else, they could have taken that character a whole different
Exactly,
way. Instead of
exactly.
a calm, cool thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and then it could have even been. You're right. He brought the audience to him rather than the opposite. He didn't have to go to the audience, so to speak, and that was great. I mean, that was another great role. Yeah, I mean, the only other person I have written down here that I think is also interesting is Calvin Candy, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Django Unchained. That's a really interesting role too, and people always talk about how, you know, he actually cut his hand on the glass and then kept going and stuff like that, and people really admire that from him as a performer because he's DiCaprio and because of the roles he does, and he's always the leading man, that he did something in a Tarantino movie that was so against type, racist, crazy guy, right? Mm-hmm. And then had that level of commitment to it, to literally bleed, actually bleed for the role, and then to keep going, but also to play something that he didn't necessarily have to play, at all, actually, by any means. So that just shows how great of a performer he is and how well he pulled that off. I mean, and that's, again, an example of somebody who is very scary, who almost all of everybody in Hollywood or whatever any audience member is used to DiCaprio being the guy that's saving us, and then to have him be the guy that's terrorizing us is great. I mean, he did such a great job of that. He was totally committed, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. He was always looked at as the good guy, even in kind of Shutter Island,
Yeah, always.
You kind of still felt he was a good guy. You kind of felt like
you did. You were still with him.
Over,
you were still with him.
I mean, and so it was really interesting, and I think actors really like that.
Yeah.
I think if you really break an actor out of the type role.
Yeah.
You give them the opportunity to do that. Not because you believe in them or whatever. It's just because you know what, it could work. Because that's all you could go off of.
That's right.
It could work.
Because nobody really knows. You just have to go with like your instinct.
Yeah.
And their instinct and whatever those discussions are that you have.
And that's where you get great moments in movies.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what creates something that's
because eventually one actor will break the type in one scene.
Right. Exactly.
They'll let it go and they'll do something.
Exactly. But so I think we'll bring it to a close on that note. I think that was a great place to bring it together. So we hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode of Film Valor. I think it was sort of an interesting topic. We'd love to know what you guys think, and maybe some other performances out there that occurred and existed and succeeded against type. Or maybe you guys feel it's the opposite way and that we need to do more typecasting because we're getting closer to something, I guess. I don't know. But whatever that is, just let us know. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
All right, take care, guys.